Okay, guys, in GravelTown, tell me when to start and how to go about doing this.
Okay,
We can wait a few minutes. It's entirely up to you, whatever you want me to do.
okay. Uh, we just take 5 minutes, and if you want to start, it's okay. In 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Alonso, a partir de ahorita, súper silencio, ¿de acuerdo? Súper silencio.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Yeah, Joe.
Super ready, mate.
Super ready. Oh, okay. Well, my name is Joe. I'm the owner of a 718 Cyclery in Brooklyn, New York. We were asked and definitely wanted to contribute to GravelTown's first birthday anniversary. So happy birthday to the guys down at GravelTown. They've been big supporters of us, and we're trying to support them as best as we can. We've been a shop since 2008, and we've been doing a lot of camping trips and bike packing since about 2014. 15 to 20 trips a year, and it just keeps getting more and more busy with that. So what this is a presentation that we've given a number of times to new people that are looking to learn a little bit about bike camping, bike packing, bike touring, whatever you want to call it. And it just talks about, our process and how we go through setting up a trip, going on a trip, and how that all works. And I usually like to break it down into planning the whole trip, then packing, getting everything on the bike, the actual riding, which is the fun part, and then the camping part of it. So, for all the trips that we do, we have an orientation session very similar to this that talks about all the different aspects of the trip. Okay, so this year in 2022, we're probably going to do about 20 trips. We've done 3 week-long trips. We do long trips. We do short overnight trips. It ranges. I'm a one-person shop, so we do a lot for one person. But it's incredibly enjoyable, and it's a ton of fun. I have a little bit of a cough, so I'm going to try to cover my mouth so I'm not coughing into the microphone. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is how we kind of plan our trips and how we kind of decide where we're going to go and how we kind of plan a trip. And for me, it's always about safety. We have fun and it's good to have fun, but the overall piece of this is safety. We've had incidents in the past. I'm sure we'll have incidents in the future. Riding a bike out in the wilderness or out on a road is a dangerous thing. So things can happen. So we prepare ourselves, by understanding the route, understanding where we're going, understanding what the challenges are, and also having a nice group meeting similar to this beforehand. We also have ride programs and packing lists and all these kinds of things that I'll talk to you about, all available on our website to download for anyone to use. So in terms of planning, what I like to do is I like to kind of start at the end and work my way back. So this summer we did a trip from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C., and that's 370 miles along a bike path, and we took about 16 people on that trip. So what I like to do when it's a trip that I haven't done before is I think about the planning module that I use is 60 miles a day. I'm not sure what that is in kilometers, but 60 miles a day, because what I like to think about is riding 10 miles an hour, which is slow, for 60 miles is 6 hours of riding. So that's 3 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. And that's just a really rough way for me to start planning a trip with a group. So once I start with that module and the trip that we did that I'm describing, the long trip that we did that was 370 miles, well, that's about 60 miles a day with a few extras. Excuse me. So what I started to do was just draw a map. I was an architect in a previous life, and I draw a lot. So I started, literally just, before even getting on the computer, I start drawing diagrams and maps, and I'll do this real kind of low tech kind of vision here. But this is a map that just basically each of those dots is 60 miles. So I'm just literally drawing things on a map and then kind of comparing what is going to happen in that 60 miles. Is there a place to camp? Is there a place for food? Are there bathrooms and water and all those kinds of things? So that's how we kind of go through the planning. And once I kind of rough it out on paper, I'll then jump into, I like to use Ride with GPS. I mean, there's a lot of different tools out there that people use. I find that Ride with GPS is great for the way that I work, in that it's easy to share the files share the route with others. It's easy to download that information into a Garmin or a Wahoo. Again, there's a bunch of tools out there that are very, all very similar. I find it's relatively inexpensive. But what I'll then do is I'll start to transcribe this hand-drawn map onto a Ride with GPS route and start to understand what that really looks like. And if it's a route that I haven't done before, I will also, Ride with GPS is pretty good about, showing different locations, but I'll also use Google Maps at the same time, because in a day, let's call it the first day, and it's 60 miles in our first day. And again, we're still talking about the planning. What I like to do is I like to just understand the structure of the day. So, in my world, we leave at 8 o'clock in the morning. So backing that up a little bit, for people that are new, on the multi-day trips, you have to really have your kind of act together in terms of your stuff and your gear and packing and unpacking. You kind of have to have a system. And folks that are new on multi-day trips, certainly that's how you learn. So the first day or so, it's usually a little slow getting out of camp because people are still figuring out how to pack that tent up and how to get going again. Excuse me. So, in my mind, what I tell folks, or how I work with folks that are new, is that, I think about in the morning waking up, and I think about an hour to cook and eat and an hour to pack, right? So that's 2 hours in the morning of kind of getting ready. So I let people, let people think about that as a structured idea, and they can certainly do whatever they want with it. I get up very early, whatever. What I don't like to have people doing is what I call packing under duress, like packing in a hurry because they think the group is going to leave. The group's not going to leave. I don't like people when they're rushing and packing in the morning because they'll make mistakes. Things fall off bikes. We just had a really big trip last week in the Catskill Mountains. Someone packed a little too fast, and jacket fell off her bike, got into her rear wheel. She came off the bike on a busy road. It could have been very, very, very bad. It thankfully was not a big, no one was injured, but it could have been very bad. But it was because she rushed. And then what I like to also think too is I'm a person who's very into scheduling. Like I'm on time, and I'm always like, so going on these trips is very therapeutic for me because you have to throw a lot of that away when you're going with 16 strangers. And I'm like, we have to leave at 8 o'clock. And what I like to tell myself is that like 3 or 4 weeks later, if we left at 8:17 as opposed to 8 o'clock, I'm not even going to remember, right? It doesn't matter, right? So I try to give the day a bit of structure, but I'm also not a drill sergeant about it. So, again, we like to eat in camp in the morning. People like to have their coffee or their oatmeal or things. I'll try to plan a stop within about 15 or 20 miles for like a coffee or, something, in addition to breakfast. I'll look for a little town that we can stop in. Maybe there's a town, maybe there isn't. And then we'll look at a place for lunch, right? We want to stop in another little town to have lunch. Basically, I try to kind of set the day up that way, the way you would set up a normal, day in your normal life. One of the things I really like to do, however, is before we get to camp, I like to look for a supermarket or a grocery store, within about 5 miles from camp, because, that's when people are buying food for dinner and potentially the next breakfast. So as opposed to carrying food all day long, I like to really look for, places where we can buy food very late in the day. So you're not carrying it around for miles and miles. And that's kind of how we kind of march we do a lot of overnight trips, which we call micro tours. And we do a lot of week-long trips. So both of those are kind of in the same planning module. It's kind of how I think about, giving the group some structure and having an understanding of where we're stopping. So that's kind of the planning and how we kind of plan. And before we jump into any trip, anyone who's going on any trip, for me, like for instance, we're going on a trip on Saturday morning. We're taking about 30 people. We're riding 45 miles to camp and then coming home the next day, Saturday to Sunday. But every one of those folks has what's called a ride program, which is a doc. I think I cut out there for a second. The internet apparently is unstable. So I'll keep going until it just cuts me off again. I totally rattled. I don't know what I was talking about. So everyone that's going on a trip this weekend has a really good understanding of the maps, a good understanding of where we're going, what the ride's going to look like, where we're stopping, who the people in the back are going to be, how the ride is kind of structured. So that's kind of my whole planning thing that I want to talk about is and then once we do a trip once, it then becomes a lot easier to plan the next year. There's a particular trip that we do every year. It's a one-night trip. It's the trip we're doing this weekend. We go to the same campsite like 8 times sometimes in the same year. So you get very good at understanding all the issues with what's going to happen on that trip, right? And for me, yeah, I'm going to the same place over and over again, but it's not about me, right? It's about the people going on the trip for the first time. So that's very important to remember as a group leader, that it's not my trip, it's their trip. And I'm just kind of taking them on their trip. All right, so that's what I would call kind of the way I do planning. So packing, how we kind of manage that is that for me personally, we go on so many trips. My bike, when I live around the corner from the shop. I live very close to the shop. So when I come home from a trip, I just throw my bike in the store and just walk home. The bike stays in the store on a table in the middle of the shop with all the bags on it. We go on so many trips that I never truly unpack it. It's kind of like a cruise ship. It just keeps going and going and going. So I end up editing things, taking things on, taking things off. But it's a nice display in the store for people to look at, different examples of bags, because I'm always trying different ideas. But for packing, with people that are new, we always try to, certainly people want the cool frame bags and everything looks really sleek and everything. But what I'll try to kind of work with people on if they're new to it is to just, for an overnight trip, if you can just put a rack on the back of your bike and just 2 panniers, you're going to be set, for the overnights. You don't buy expensive bags. Don't get a new gravel, don't get a new bike. Let's use the bike you have. On our overnight trips, which we do a lot more of, probably about 15 of those a year. We've had people do it on folding bikes, fixed gears, single speeds, all kinds of bikes. What I tell people is that it's not about the bike and it's not about the gear. It's only 45 miles. It's not that far and it's pretty flat where we go. So it's a great way to kind of get out there and do this and not worry about the gear and the bike. And, all that stuff will come on more advanced trips. But for our basic trips, I don't want people spending tons of money and, investing in all this stuff. And what if they hate it, or what if something happens? So what I'll always tell folks is that in terms of packing, we leave on a Saturday morning, for instance, and I tell them that, don't let Saturday morning be the first time that you have stuff on your bike, right? In a perfect world, what I like to help people do is, kind of get packed up about a week before and really get some practice understanding what the bike feels like, how things are working with straps and bungee cords and whatever, and kind of, trying to identify problems that you might have before we go on the trip. The person that's showing up and it's still a disaster and things are going to fall off the bike and it's dangerous, and it also slows the group down, right? It also kind of slows the group down a bit. So what I like to do is have people pack in advance about a week before. And a lot of times people will come by the shop to kind of show off or to show me, examples of how they're packing and, maybe ask questions or maybe buy a couple of those volet straps to kind of, seal the deal there. But it's, really important to pack well. And, when I think of packing a bike, there's like 2 roads to go down. There's the rack and kind of world, and there's the frame bag world, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. For racks, if you're going to do a rack with panniers, the advantage there is it's very easy, right? It's easy to get a rack on your bike, easy to get panniers, and I think about the cost, right? Dollars per liter, right? So panniers are relatively inexpensive compared to other kinds of frame bags. How much you're paying, how much storage space you're getting. Very simple, very universal to install a rack on most bikes. Usually nice big capacity. There's some good advantages to a rack and pannier system. What I think the disadvantages are is that now you're carrying the weight of the rack on your bike, so that's an extra thing. That thing is mechanically fastened to your bike, so that thing can fall off. And I've certainly seen more than my share of racks falling off of bikes. And the thing with panniers, and this is a weird analogy, and I hope this translates well, but it's human nature just to, if you have a bag, just to fill it. So if you have big size panniers or whatever, it's just human nature just to load it with crap, right? Just because you can. The analogy I use is that if you had 3 weeks to plan a wedding or 3 years to plan a wedding, you're going to fill the space no matter what. So sometimes panniers kind of lead people into just taking too much stuff, which, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. So now we're talking about frame bags, and frame bags are the bags that kind of attach onto the bike without any racks. You have cool saddle bags in the back, or maybe a frame bag in the interior triangle, or, some feed bags in the front. These are bags that strap onto your bike. And the advantage there is that they're strapping onto your bike pretty easily. They can come off pretty easily. You're not dealing with the weight of a rack. It usually, and what it also does is it keeps the weight on the center line of the bike, right? You have all the weight and all the stuff kind of coming down the center line of a bike when you're doing a frame bag system. When you have a rack and panniers, you have those bags kind of off to the side and, kind of messes with your center of gravity a little bit, and also can get caught on things. The downside of frame bags is the cost, right? They tend to be a little more expensive. So $1 per volume, you're going to end up paying a little more. And also it kind of forces you to be a minimalist, right? It kind of really, really kind of forces your hand in terms of what you're going to pack and what you're going to bring. And personally, I think that's a really good thing, right? I think that, really having to look at what you're bringing is really critical. But for someone who's new, you're gonna, not that I'm gonna sit there and tell you exactly what to bring, because you're gonna bring things that you think you need that make you comfortable. And then perhaps you're gonna realize after the trip, like, hey, I didn't really need that. What I do when I kind of unpack, if I keep unpacking something over and over again that I'm not using, like an axe or something strange, I'm like, why am I bringing this? Like, I don't use it. Like, why am I bringing this? So I kind of ask myself all the time. Now, the danger there is you kind of work your way into a real minimal situation, and then you're missing something or needing something, right? One of the sayings is it's better to be looking at it than to be looking for it, right? You want to bring that stuff. So, you get to a point where there is diminishing returns, where you're kind of editing out and getting light and light and light. And all of a sudden, I need that axe, or all of a sudden, I need that rain hat, or whatever it is. So there's a fine line to be drawn. And it does come with experience. And also, the nature of the trips that we do, if you forget bug spray, well, there's going to be 28 other people that probably didn't forget bug spray. It's going to be with a group, there's kind of a safety net. What I'm not describing is kind of going off on your own as a solo. Well, then certainly you have to take care of all of those things. But what I'm describing is a little more of a group dynamic. Excuse me while I drink some water. And again, what we'll do in terms of, because the person that signs up for a trip, it's like, what do I bring? Like, how do you even know? So what I do is and this is all on our website. It's a 718c.com. And there's a resources section. And you'll see in this resources section, there's a packing list really for every trip I've done in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's a Google Doc, and there's links to it so people can look at this first aid kit or check out this strap. And what I always tell folks is that when you look at my packing list is going to be rather extensive, because I'm leading a group. I have to have a big first aid kit. I have to have a bag with tons of straps and ropes and all the things that are going to snap and break on 30 people's bikes. I have to have like nuts and bolts and tools and all these kinds of things. So I tell people to kind of ignore the quantity sometimes of some of these things, and to just look at the categories, because I'll talk about that in a second. But I use a system of categorization to kind of make sure I have everything taken care of. Now, if I was a really slick Zoom presenter, I would have these and kind of show them on the screen and all that kind of stuff, but I'm really not, so, but it's all on our website for sure. And you can, and they're really available for anyone. A lot of our trips, I constantly get people that come in the shop and say, hey, we used your map and we went, from here to there. And, you don't realize how many people are using these resources that we put up there: maps, ride programs, and packing lists. So it is kind of a resource. And yeah, there's just a lot of people that use this material, and it's free. It's free to, to kind of do these things. The more people that do these things, the better it is for my little business, right? So in terms of, so that's kind of getting ready for packing. And what I like to do for packing is there's a method of gear carrying, I guess you can describe it, called the 10 Essentials. And if you look it up, you'll find it. It was developed in the 1930s in the Pacific Northwest by a mountaineering club, I believe. And it goes through 10 categories of things that you would need. I'll read the 10 categories. And again, if I was a slick Zoom presenter, I would have them bop, 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 graphics. I don't have that, but I have a blog post about it. And I'll talk, I don't want to belabor the point, but I'll just go through that. I think I'm back. All right. Just got to wait for the internet to show up again. Sorry about that.
What do you say?
I'm back. All right. I'll just keep going until it cuts me off again. You heard me curse probably, but
Joe, you're at the 10. I think you're talking about the 10 categories or something.
Yes, I'm going to talk about the 10 categories. It's called the 10 Essentials, and I'm just going to rip through them real quick. So then forgot that I used to have a way to remember this, but I don't have one right now. Where is it? Okay, so the first one is hydration. That talks about, and what I think of as hydration is water on the bike, and then also water situations as we get to camp. Do we have to filter water? Water tablets. Is there a water source, right? So the first category all kind of deals with water. The second one is nutrition. And again, I break that up into like nutrition on the bike, because what I always tell people in groups that we're riding with is, never, don't wait until you're hungry to eat, and don't wait until you're thirsty to drink, right? You should be doing this all day long. Every stop that we make, we stop every 8 or 9 miles. Sometimes, I'll instantly, eat whatever power bar or whatever I have, just to kind of keep it moving, and as an example for folks. So and with drinking too, just keep drinking water as much as we can. So that's the second thing, which is number 2, which is nutrition. Number 3, navigation. And again, these were developed in the 30s. So back in 1930, navigation meant a compass and a map. Today, navigation means a Garmin InReach and all kinds of other devices, right? So these are things that that I take very seriously. On all of our trips, I use either a Wahoo or a Garmin. I go back and forth because I like to use different devices. I always carry a Garmin, what's called a Garmin InReach, which is a satellite. I think I might even have it. Hold on. I'm getting my bike packed for the weekend. Let me see if I can find it. Ah, sweet. Just one of these guys. So all this is it's a satellite texting device, or a satellite communication device. And, certainly the trips that we do in the Northeast part of the United States, pretty populated areas, but there are, in part of our Catskill trip that we did last week, there are 2 full days that you really don't have service. So what I use that device for is to get weather reports, right? Because to understand the weather for the day, so the group knows, and also in case there's emergencies. So when I do go on these trips, I kind of let my wife know. We do a test, and I was like, if you ever get a text from this number, it's serious, right? Don't think it's a weird number. So we always test it a couple times a year to make sure that if something happens out in the wilderness and I don't have regular phone service, we can get phone service or we can get help. I've never had to use it under duress, and I'll knock on wood for that. Thankfully, I use it for, for weather and things like that when we can't get weather reports right now. So that's, but what I also talk about is with this navigation, which is number 3, a lot of people, are over reliant on our phones and electronics and things like that. So what I always tell new people who are going to use their phone or whatever, I said, look, imagine your phone is dead and imagine you're lost, like you're not with the group, right? There's no way to get in touch with you. So what we always provide everyone is a kind of a very basic, like a map, which I'll show you real quick what we do. I can find one. Yeah, here we go. So, we provide, we do all this GPS stuff, and we give everyone the GPS files. And on any given ride, at least 50% of the people have not looked at that and have no idea. Like, that's just the way it is. Everyone's busy, they're distracted, they're going with their friend, and their friend knows where they're going. And, I've learned to get over this, because it used to really annoy me, because, when we do our rides, I'm like a middle of the pack in terms of speed. I'm not the fastest person, I'm not the slowest person, but I know where I'm going. So invariably, everyone kind of gets behind me, and the people that are fast, I can hear them like spinning their freewheels because I'm not going fast enough for them, but they don't know where they're going, right? So that's always a little annoying, but whatever. But what I do is I provide, I'll put this up to the screen here. Hard to see, but essentially it's like a cartoon map. I always describe this as like a map that you'd see on like the back of a children's restaurant menu, for like it's a very basic map, right? It's almost like, we make it a PDF and everyone can use it. And I almost think about it as like, when you're lost, you can then like go to the gas station and point to this map and be like, where am I? So it's something, right? Because I know half the people don't know where they're going. In addition, we provide cue sheets. Now, cue sheets are, even more kind of archaic, and no one's going to read cue sheets. It's like very rare on our trips that someone will actually whip out cue sheets. And cue sheets, in case you don't know, are like kind of a very, very specific format of printed directions that are it's like turn by turn directions, go 500 feet on Main Street and turn left. And it's a very specific way that's kind of formatted. It's kind of hard to read if you don't know what you're reading. It's very kind of cryptic. And it's very old fashioned, like super duper old fashioned. But I always provide them because, again, imagine you don't have a phone and you're kind of like, you're out of luck. So I really try to tell people that I understand you're not going to look at these maps, but have something printed with you, right? In addition, have the riding, the contact list printed with you. Don't worry, and I even do this, right? And I've been doing this for a long time. I print out the contact list, I print out the cue sheets, and I've gone to these places like in some cases 40 or 50 times. Like I'm not going to get lost, but I do it as an example, and I do it so I can give it out to someone if they need it. So that's number 3. That's kind of the navigation side of things. Number 4 is shelter, and that's pretty obvious. That's tent. I kind of consider that tent sleeping system, right? So when people are packing and people are new, I always describe the tent, sleeping bag, and sleeping pad as like the 3 bigger kind of items in terms of cost and also in terms of volume, right? These are bigger things that you have to kind of find a spot for. We have a lot of folks that do hammocks. I'm not a hammock person. Someday I might be. Hammock life is coming at me from all angles. I haven't done it yet. And I really respect the people that can pull that off. I just don't see myself pulling that off, right? But when you do a hammock and now your shelter and your sleeping system is the same thing and it's this big, I mean, there's some advantages there. But we do some cold weather camping, and that becomes I think a challenge, but people do it. And also I'm noticing more and more campsites aren't allowing hammocks because of the the damage that the straps do to the trees, because it's undeniable that I don't care how big and soft and fluffy the straps are, you're still grabbing trees pretty hard. So we're seeing a little more of hammocks really not being available. And also, if you get to a site where there just aren't 2 really good trees to kind of make a hammock, I've been to sites where people have hammocks and they can't hang them because there's no real good place to be. So that's a big question I always get on our trips. People ask me, can I bring a hammock? And if it's a place that I know and oh yeah, there's a bunch of trees, I'll let them know. So that's like sleep system. That's number 4. Number 5, let's see, I drew over this like an idiot, is illumination. And the way I think of illumination is lights on the bike. I think of headlamps. I think of lights in camp. I find that I use my phone light in camp more and more than my headlamp at this point. For whatever reason, I find I don't throw my headlamp on as much as I should, because you're kind of always blasting someone's eyes with it and stuff. I know there's the red zone thing, but I find I use my phone more and more if I have to like go use the bathroom at night, and just use the phone as a light. So, whatever, I kind of use that as and that's a camp illumination. The next thing is 6 is fire starting, right? This is an understanding of how to get a fire started in all kinds of conditions. And this is always a little fun because a lot of people bring, on a camping trip like this weekend, we'll have 30 people. There'll be a lot of ways to start a fire, and people want to try out new stuff or new tinder, or there's all kinds of cool gels and just weird stuff. So I always bring a bunch. I bring, 4 or 5, for me, I think about 4 or 5 ways to start a fire. Lighter, waterproof matches. I have a USB charging lighter, which is actually pretty cool. So I have those things. And also I have the kind of the fire starters, the things that are going to stay lit. Tinder, a real popular one right now is cotton balls with Vaseline on them. They're amazing. They're like little bombs, but they just stay lit. And what you're looking for is things that stay lit while you're lighting a fire and while you're putting that real small tinder over the fire. So in the spring and summer and fall here in the Northeast, starting a fire is kind of fun. Different people have different methods. I've learned a ton of different ways just by watching, all kinds of people want to start the fire and want to try out new methods. So I've learned a lot about different methods and different ways. We had a guy once who was like, my job is to start the wood fire in the pizza oven every day. And he just made this amazing fire. And it was a real simple process. And it was really kind of neat to see his process for someone that does that every day. In the winter, it becomes a little bit of a challenge, or in weather where, it's wet and you kind of do need the campfire. When we go camping in December and January and it's 25 degrees out, you really do need that fire. So my fire kit will grow a little bit in terms of different gadgets and options. And, you try doing it the natural way for the first few times, but then it's like, if that's not working, I don't mind taking out the gel and just like lighting the stuff on fire. It's like, it becomes a safety issue after a little bit. And, again, safety is by far the most important thing for us. So that's getting a fire started. So that's fire kit. That's number Gosh, I'm coughing. It's five. Let's see, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Why is this not 8, 9? Oh, I gotcha. So 8, 7 being fire starting, 8 first aid, right? We try to have people bring as much of a first aid kit as they possibly can. And you think about things that happen to cyclists on the road that are treatable, right? It's scrapes, it's abrasions, it's road rash, and those kinds of things. So in that case, we try to tell people to bring things like antiseptic wipes or first aid spray or first aid cream, the things that are going to remove infections, right? And also gauze to cover that, right? I had wilderness first aid training. I've used it a number of times, nothing incredibly crazy. But I bring a bigger first aid kit, and my first aid kit includes a tourniquet, which hopefully I'll never ever have to use. Some of those blood clotting devices that are like these pads that just, the military develops these first aid kind of blood clotting things for some really horrible situations. So they're commercially available, so I have those. Yeah, I do have a bigger first aid kit just because, and I hope like a success for me is never having to use it, right? That's the best, is never having to open it. So that's number 8. Number 9 is a repair kit. And again, this was designed in the 30s and kind of still has been modernized, but modernized for more backpacking and hiking. So I've kind of taken this to turn it into the bike version of the 10 essentials. So that repair kit is going to talk about the things you would need to fix a bike, multi-tool, flat tire, tubes. What we do on our trips is that, a lot of people do have apprehension about, what happens if I get a flat. I don't know how to fix a flat. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that, which is totally normal, and I get it. So what I always tell people is just bring a multi-tool and bring a tube, right? I'm not bringing tubes for everybody. Everyone's going to bring their own tube. And if there's a challenge or a stoppage or a flat, and it's usually like 10% of the riders will get a flat over the course of 2 days. That's a general average. There's always sometimes we go through trips where no one gets a flat. Sometimes we've had trips where there's been like 11 flats on the way to camp, so it's all over the place. And in terms of people's bikes and looking at their bikes and what condition their bikes are in, we used to, years ago, have people come to the shop and we would inspect their bikes and kind of, go over it with them and give them a seal of approval or whatever. But I just found that it just was very time consuming. It opened us up legally for like a lot of issues where I say, hey, your bike is perfectly great, and then something happens, right? So we have a waiver now that people sign, and basically it just, they describe, it basically says, my bike is in good working order and it's up to me to figure that out. So gosh, what we'll tell people is to go to a bike shop, get a tune up, those kinds of things. We don't do any service anymore, so we're not going to really do that for folks. But we want to have people, if you're showing up with a bike that's in bad shape, it's just going to slow everyone down and be a kind of a challenge and a drag. So, no one wants to be that person that's causing all that kind of slowdown. So people are usually pretty good about that. But so the repair kit for me, what I bring is cables, brake cables, shift cables, lots of nuts and bolts, like lots of different sizes of nuts and bolts. The big thing that I learned over the summer is like people that ride clipped or clipped in with clipless, those cleat bolts, right? We had 2 problems over our summer trip with cleat bolts kind of snapping. So now I carry cleat bolts. They're weird. They're a little weird shape with like a pan head. And so I have those in my kit now. It's great. So now I'll never have to use them probably now that they're my kit. So yeah, we kind of take care of stuff. Sometimes there's just stuff that we just can't fix on the road, and the person will have to kind of call an Uber XL and kind of deal with it. There's a point where, there's nothing you can do on the side of the road for like a bunch of broken spokes or whatever it is, right? So we'll try to get that person kind of on their way, and maybe they meet up with us later, or maybe they don't. So that's the repair kit. That's number 9. And number 10 is what they call sun protection. And, I think about, first aid cream, just sunscreen essentially, right? And, I wear a helmet with a brim, and I try to keep the sun out of my face. And but yeah, that's really just the sunscreen essentially, right? Because you're on a bike and there's not a lot you can do. If you're a hiker, you would wear a big brimmed hat and cover your ears and all kinds of stuff. But for cycling, you really can't do that. So I think of number 10 as like a sunscreen thing. So that's kind of the packing and all the stuff, right? That's the way. And again, I got a couple blog posts about this and diagrams and stuff. And what I do, in addition, when I pack for every trip, I make a diagram so I can show everyone, and I take pictures and stuff, but just to show everyone ideas about it. So I'm going to flip through these real quick. And again, this is just like a diagram from a trip, and this is where all the stuff is going, right? So I just constantly do these little weirdo drawings of like where stuff is, right? Right? Every trip I do something like this. And that's just to kind of show people, a lot of times, people sometimes get intimidated by it, like, oh my God, you don't have a lot of stuff on your bike. And, what I tell people is like, look, whatever it is you do for a living, you would do it a lot better than I would do it. Like, this is what I do for a living, right? I go on bike camping trips. So I've got a good system down, but I'm here to help and here to how people learn, the systems that I use, right? And I'm not the best bike packer in the world, but I do it a lot. It's my job. So, whatever your job is, if you're a graphic designer at some cool web company and I sat down and tried to do it, I probably couldn't do it, right? So that's what I always try to tell people is that don't get so freaked out about the way that my bike looks. And to be quite honest, the things that I use on my bike are not super high-end bike shop guy, titanium coolness, stuff like that. I really try to use the stuff that I sell in the store. Invariably on a trip, we'll have a lot of people that are, have bought gear from the shop, and it's the same gear that I'm using, right? So our shop is very small. You can't really see it, but it is pretty small. And everything in here, more or less, are things that I use, right? These are, I'll turn this sideways real quick so you can see like got a wall of like all this like weirdo camping gear and stuff like that. It's all kind of populated with, let's see if I can get this back the way it should be. It's all kind of popular with the stuff I use, right? Because I'm not a salesman. I'm not someone that can sell, ice cubes to people that live in Alaska, right? I can't do that. But I use this stuff all the time and like, yeah, this is the stove that I use. Like, it's the same stove. This is the this and this is the that. So it's been really helpful for me on trips. I try out new things and I'm able to, help people purchase these things when they come into the store and they don't want to go to Amazon and not know what's going to happen or read a bunch of fake reviews. Yeah, I'll tell so that's kind of the way that we work with gear, but I don't use a lot of super duper high-end unattainable crazy stuff. I just don't. Even my bike isn't like super duper crazy. It's a Kona Rove, it's a $2,000 stock bike that I've modified. So anyway, that's the packing side of it, which is a lot. The next two pieces I'll get through pretty quick, I promise. The riding part of it. This is us riding as a group, right? And primarily here in the Northeast of the United States, we are leaving from New York City and we're riding on roads for a long time, pavement. There are a lot of nice trails that are in the woods that are paved where there's no cars, which is really nice. So we try to, get to those situations pretty quick. Most people that go on our trips are experienced riding in a city environment, so this doesn't really scare them in terms of the parts of our trip that are in the city as we're leaving the city. But I have noticed that the things that have happened over the years, so our overnight trips primarily follow the same pattern where, excuse me, we leave from New York City, maybe 10 miles, 15 miles, we'll get on a rail trail that's 30 miles or whatever. And then at some point we'll have to get off the rail trail to go into the little town or whatever, where the camping is. Just about every problem we've ever had, problem being accident or crash, has happened in the last like 4 or 5 miles of a trip where we're in suburban America, essentially, and we're riding. And, now we have motorists who aren't used to seeing cyclists. Now we have distracted drivers looking at their phones. Now we have cyclists not used to suburban intersections and all the weird kind of, it's very vehicular, and the intersections in the suburbs are based around cars. The infrastructure is based around cars, and it's very unfamiliar for someone who rides in the city. So again, our riding, we stop, we have stop points along the way where everyone has to stop, and I'll tell them and talk to them about, hey, the next 3 miles, there's a really steep downhill and there's a traffic light that's really fast. So be really careful, get on your brakes, don't assume you're going to fly through it. And again, these are some of the just the experiences of doing these trips over and over again. I know these little ins and outs, right? So we stop the group, and we stop a lot more often. When we get to the last 4 or 5 miles, we'll stop, I think, about 3 times on our particular ride. And also, as an aside, all of our rides, we have a video, we have a YouTube channel, and all the rides we do, we make videos about every single ride. So you can go and kind of see the things that I'm talking about, how we stop and how we do it and what our trips look like. So definitely check it. This isn't like a plug. Definitely check out the YouTube channel because it'll really kind of flesh out all of these things that I'm just talking about. All the trips we do, we have a really cool, I make all these crazy videos about all the things that we do. But in terms of riding, what we also started using this year, and this is a really great tool that I didn't think was a great tool, is WhatsApp. For me, I thought WhatsApp was like one of these things that like teenage kids use so their parents couldn't find out what they were texting. Like I just didn't know what it was. And I'm a pretty technical guy. But one of my riders early on this year kind of showed me some of the advantages. So what we do in the planning of our trip, about 2 weeks before the trip, we get off of email. Everyone has to join WhatsApp. And at that point, it's just a much more fluid conversation about questions and pictures and all kinds of stuff like leading up to the trip, right? Then the actual trip, it's amazing because you can, I can pin my location. I can, I'll put in, hey, this is the store that we're stopping at for lunch. Send it to everyone so everyone has it. My location, everyone can follow my location. It's just a wonderful tool for this kind of stuff. And it makes it, you're not doing it while you're riding. You're not texting and riding, right? But it's just it's a tool that helps with safety like immensely, because in the past we would, text each other, and with 30 people, it's hard to text, that's a really cumbersome way to deal with it. But WhatsApp is nice because, even when people get a flat and I'm way ahead and they might need my help to come back, or maybe they're figuring it out on their own, they'll take a picture of like what the problem is. And I'll be like, all right, you guys, I'll be right back. And it's just a really great tool, right? I mean, I'm talking about, a technology tool that everyone knows about. So, but it's an excellent tool. And, when we're done, what's also super, super cool, and I didn't realize this, but when we're done, we get home and everyone's saying their goodbyes and, and I keep the WhatsApp going. You can download, basically the whole chat log, and to look at, kind of the entirety of like when we started planning to the trip itself as like a transcript with like, sentences and text. It's an unbelievable like way to kind of experience or to remember the trip, because you have all kinds of crazy, hey, I'm lost. And, it's just a really crazy thing. And I really have grown to really love it. Anyway, that's a tool that we use. And it's, again, it's safety. What I also noticed is that over the years, as you ride with people and ride with groups, there are certain mannerisms that we all have in terms of riding with a group, right? This isn't a Peloton that's, super duper fast, but there are certain rules that we try to kind of adhere to. And we had a trip over the summer where of the 17 people, 12 of them were brand new, not riding in a group, not doing bike camping, brand new. And like on the ride, I got like rear-ended twice. People ran to the back of me, and like, it was a real kind of a mess. So we actually pulled the group over on the side of the road and went through like, okay, this is what happens when you slow down. You say, I'm slowing down, and you put your hand up. This is how you pass someone on the left. Like we kind of went through this, and not in a condescending way or a mean way. It was kind of fun. But I just had realized that I'd done this for so long that I just assumed that everyone kind of rode that way. And I realized that that's not the case. So what I actually did a couple of weeks ago is created a ride, kind of a guide for how we ride, like the rules that we use. Hey, we're stopping at every traffic light. Hey, we're not taking left turns across traffic. Lights and helmets mandatory. This is how we pass someone on the left. You're going to ring a bell before you get to that person. As you're passing them, you're going to say on your left and gently pass them. And when you're slowing down and stopping, when you're crossing an intersection, this is how you cross an intersection. And this is what you say when you cross an intersection. And this is how you use your hands. And so I realized that, and there's tons of resources out there. I mean, this has been, when I looked it up to find a good kind of starting point for a guide, I mean, there's 130 years of this information out there, right? I mean, this is as old as time itself with cycling. So I kind of found some of the things that I liked and kind of transcribed it into the ways that we ride. So that's also on our website too, if you want to go look at it. But it's helped a lot. And I noticed a lot of people looking at it because, when people are new, to doing this, and they'll come in and they want to go on a trip, and they're excited about it, but they're very nervous. And the anxiety that I get from people, and this is from almost everyone who's new, and you can be in great shape or super cyclist or hiker. A lot of people worry about their fitness level and worry about getting left behind, right? I hear that a lot. People are really nervous about, if you haven't ridden in a group before and all of a sudden you're riding off with all these, people with all the stuff on their bike, and everyone looks like they know what they're doing, which is not the case, but everyone kind of looks like they're professional, and everyone looks, I feel out of place. And so what I always tell people is that, I don't discount their feelings. I don't say that's stupid, don't think that way, you'll be fine. I kind of let them have their feelings and like let them you can feel that way, it's fine. But I'll tell you this, like on Sunday when we're done and you're home, you're going to say to yourself, I can't believe I thought that was going to be I can't believe that was a big deal. I can't believe I got worked up over that. It was so relaxed and so chill and whatever. So, it's kind of managing also people's, stress levels about this, because doing this kind of thing, you're really putting yourself out there physically, mentally, you're really, kind of exposing yourself in a lot of ways. So the person that does these things, I've noticed there's a certain kind of person that I love being around, right? This is a person that's really trying something difficult and complicated in a way, for a person that doesn't know how to do this stuff, looking on the outside, looking in, this all looks very complicated and very like serious. And it's really not that complicated or serious. But to do that and to kind of like jump into a group where maybe a lot of people know each other in this group, and to really do that as a really special kind of person. So that's what I really enjoy about these trips, is really bringing new people into the environment. And for the stuff that we do, I've noticed that, again, we've been doing these for 8 or 9 years. People have gone off and started their own clubs. They do their own trips. And like the family tree of the stuff that we've kind of been involved with is really just a massive connection. And in New York City, strangely enough, you kind of run into the same people over and over again that are doing this, right? There's 8 or 9 million people here, but it's the same, 500 people that are kind of doing this thing, because it's just, we're in an urban environment. You wouldn't think that that would be a thing, but you kind of see the same people a lot, which is fantastic because they're just wonderful people. All right, so that's kind of the riding. I think of myself as a 12-mile-an-hour kind of person. When I'm riding in the front of the group and I see that I'm, maybe there's a day where I'm like, I'm feeling great and I'm like 14 miles an hour and I'm really pushing it. I always look down and I think to myself, I know the back of the group is moving at like 10 miles an hour, and I know I'm moving at 14 miles an hour. So it's like this, like I'm leaving the group, right? So I constantly am like, the term sandbagging it, right? So, slowing myself down in order to get the group together, right? The safer group is the group that's close to each other. So I'm really monitoring my speed, because again, this is not about how fast I can go and not about my Strava numbers or whatever. It's not about me at all. A lot of my rides, when you look at like the data at the end, maybe I stopped for an hour and a half with someone who was like, had a broken wheel, so, you don't worry about the numbers and about the data, because I know a lot of people get worked up about all that kind of stuff. But I was just thinking of something real quick. Yeah, so we stop every 8 or 9 miles. We always have sweeps. I always get volunteers to be in the back, right? And it's always, we have a lot of people that do a lot of trips with us, so they kind of know the deal. And I always tell people, like, if I could be the sweep, I would love to be the sweep. I love riding in the back with that particular crowd, meandering around, not a lot of cares in the world, but invariably I have to be in the front because no one knows where they're going, right? So I end up in the front. On the way home, I usually end up drifting towards the back because it's just a much more pace that's more enjoyable for me. But what we do is we solicit volunteers to sweep, and eventually we're going to get a patch made so they would get a little reward. But I tell them, like, look, you don't have to change anyone's flat. You don't have to like wrap a tourniquet around someone's neck. Like, all you're doing is providing structure to this group where someone who's riding in the middle, who's new to this, knows that there's a back of this group and knows that they're not kind of receding from the rest of the group and getting lost, knowing there's a support. And that's all there is, right? And I tell the sweeps, like, if you come across someone who stopped, just get me on WhatsApp or call me. We'll stop, the group all stops, and we'll figure out, are we going back? Am I stopping? So it's just providing a structure, right? Again, the word structure, providing a framework for these trips. We have 5 sweeps this weekend. We have a big group of 30, and there's a lot of new people. So and I know a couple people that are super slow that are going. So I know the sweeps are gonna, it's gonna be a slow moving group this weekend. So the camping side of it, right? So this is the fourth part, and I'll get to this pretty quick. It's all leading up to this little piece of just, oh yeah, you camp. What I like to do with campsites is I like to understand what's going to happen at the campsite. What are the amenities? I use the word amenities. It sounds like a hotel. Bathroom, right? That's everyone's biggest question. What's going on with the bathroom? Is there a water source? Are there showers? Is it a place we have to take out our garbage? Is there firewood? These are the kind of things that I kind of know beforehand, because again, people that are new to this, you can certainly go wilderness camping in a lot of, this area. But a person who's new isn't going to be like, what, you mean I have to dig a hole to use the bathroom? Like there's no this, there's no, so not that we're going to like the Four Seasons Hotel, but the campsites that we go to, I want to make sure that there are some, there are things like water and all the things that a person might need to make them feel comfortable. Some of the sites, some of the places we go have better services than others. Some of them don't have water. So we kind of have, we have ways to kind of deal with all these things. But I'd like to get that out in front of everyone, because again, you're going on this crazy trip, you're trying to pack your bike and you're worrying about all this crazy stuff. So we try to like make sure people are calm about that. And in addition, with all the videos that we do, I give them a playlist of like, hey, these are the 9 times we've gone camping there this year. Watch these videos, you'll figure it out pretty quick, like what this is all about. What I do, what I like to tell people to do too, is as we get to camp, invariably what everyone wants to do when they get to camp is just like collapse on the ground and be like, oh, this is great, we're not in the city anymore. But what I like to do is get people to set their stuff up quickly. Tent, sleeping bag, because there might be daylight issues. There might be, I've been at camp where it's like, it's going to rain in 10 minutes. Like you better get set up really fast because, there's a storm coming. So I like to have everyone set up as soon as we get to camp. And again, when I say I like to have everyone set up, it's not, up to me essentially, but I suggest that, hey, let's just set up so I don't have to worry about it later. You're not doing it in the dark. With people that are new with their tents, for instance, I always tell them, like, don't let this trip be the first time you're setting your tent up. Go to the park and set it up in your living room or on your roof. But on every trip, there's someone that's like opening the plastic of their tent and like looking at the manual, and it's like, okay. So I'll try to get my tent set up first and then kind of go around and start helping folks with whatever tent, if it's a weird one or a complicated one, or they borrowed it from somebody. But I like to get everyone set up quickly, right, in case something happens with weather and storm. And now it's 10:30 at night, and oh, we had such a great time at the campfire, but I forgot to set my tent up, and now it's in the dark. And so that's one of the things I like to do. The other thing I like to do is like throw a hat on, just to kind of keep body heat in. So that's kind of the camping. We cook together usually. A lot of people have questions about food. In a lot of places we go, if there's a store that has prepared food that people can buy, sometimes I'll suggest, if you're going on this trip for the first time, like forget about cooking. Like, let's just do the camping trip, buy a sandwich that's already made, have it for breakfast, oatmeal, whatever, just do something simple. But it ranges. Like people bring cutting boards and start cutting up ingredients. It's a very wide range. And if you're watching the videos, you'll see what these cooking experiences are like with like 20 or 30 people, like at big picnic tables, making massive amounts of food. It's a wonderful part of the puzzle. But people do have some anxieties about that. So I'll usually just say, look, just don't worry about getting a stove. Don't worry about the little gas can. Don't worry about boiling water for your coffee. Just buy, some prepackaged stuff and just deal with that the first time. Don't make your life simpler. So, that's some of the things. And then, what I always like to tell people too is like, usually the day before, I'll kind of like give them a little tip, like some tips to things to remember, like things like just bring a $20 bill and just throw it in your toolkit, right? You just never know. You never know if you're going to come across a place that only accepts cash, right? Bring a mask, right? Because that's still part of what we're dealing with. And you may encounter a store or a place or a person that requires you to still wear a mask, which is fine. Bring a mask, just throw it in your bag. Don't even use it. Just bring it in case you need it. So the other kind of pro tip I always tell people is like, getting a small little backpack, right? And I'll show you mine real super quick if I can find it super duper quick. Yeah, here it is. What happens is, you pack up, everything's packed and great, and you you go to the store on the way to camp and you have no space for anything, right? Because you've packed everything nice and tight, and no one packs extra space, right? No one leaves like, I'm gonna leave space aside for food I'm gonna get later. No one ever does that. So I have this little backpack here, which is tiny, and it turns into like a 20-liter big old backpack. I mean, that's not big old backpack anyway. You kind of get a sense of it. So for the last 2 miles, I throw that on my back if I'm bringing like a can of soup or something that I don't have room for. So I tried to get people to bring some kind of like collapsible storage, right? Even on our longer trips, because you pick up stuff along the way. You don't want to pack right to the top and then start your trip. You want to, have the ability to bring that. So that's one of like the pro tips I give people, like, hey, bring something like that. We sell these things, but I'm very conscious about like me not being like a sales pitch person, like, hey, it's available at 718, just go to REI if you have to. I don't care where you go, like just bring something like that. It'll really work. Another thing I always talk about are camp shoes, right? And this means like you're riding all day in those sneakers or those clip-in shoes. It's nice to get to camp and just take those off and put on like Crocs or flip-flops or Tevas or whatever. Just bringing a secondary, like secondary shoes is always just a nice, comfortable thing to kind of get into. And the other thing that we've been doing a lot this year is, and again, this is a tip that can get expensive, but a camp chair, right? That's a foldable chair. I bring that up for folks, and I'm trying to have them not buy all kinds of things they don't need. And I will mention, like, look, getting a camp chair makes such a huge difference. And everyone that goes down that route will always agree with me. And like, that was a great idea. Just because you want to get to camp and not either sit on the ground or sit at a picnic table, So the camp chairs, they range from, 40, 50 bucks on up to, God knows what. But I always bring one. It's like what I call my luxury item. Like I bring one like luxury item. So that's the luxury item I bring, is a camp chair. So that's kind of like it. I know I kind of meandered a little bit. I'm kind of just looking at my notes here. Oh yeah. So I'll end it with the 2 questions I get every single time. And what I do now is I proactively like answer these questions before the people have them. The first one is, should I bring a lock? Get that question all the time. Should I bring a lock? In New York City, you're kind of conditioned to have like the biggest, heaviest kryptonite chain, and wherever you go. And I always tell people, like, don't bring a lock. And if of course, like something will happen and they'll say, you said not to bring a lock. What I do is I bring one of these guys, which is it's kind of like a glorified zip tie in a way. It's it's a combination lock. I just bring this as a casual lock. I barely ever use it. When we stop, we're always together. When we stop at a store, if we're stopping and 30 people are going to the grocery store, I'll stay behind and wait with the bikes until the first person comes out, and then I'll go in, right? So, and then, at night, right, people are really, people that live in urban environments are really kind of like nervous about their stuff and someone stealing their stuff. We've never had any issues at camp, right? I always tell people that someone who's like infiltrated our group for 3 or 4 years and has gotten really close to us and is going to like steal all our bikes one night, it's like the crime of the century. But there are things you can do at camp if you're concerned. You can take your front wheel off. You can run your tent line through your wheel. You can put your helmet through your wheel. You can do a lot of things. We've never had any issues. I mean, I'm sure someday we might, but I'm trying to get the person to not bring the New York kryptonite lock with them, right? Because it's so heavy. So that's the first question I always get. The second question, the second conversation is always about clipless pedals, right? Should I be riding clipless? Should I not? And this is a bigger question beyond bikepacking for sure. I'm personally, I ride with flats. I ride with shoes for a while, a couple of years ago, and I just personally found that it was more of a problem. There's more things that can go wrong. You have this like clip and this mechanical snap device, and if something happens, you have to like maybe flip the pedal over and ride with your Crocs. And I understand the value. I understand the benefits for sure, because that's why people, in the Tour de France use them. There's a reason for them. But some of the fastest people I know are wearing flats, right? So I personally wear flats or use flats, and flats are flat paddles that just put your damn foot on them and just go. But it's about like 25% of the folks on rides that we do will clip in. And but that's a question we get, and there's always a debate about it. And there's always, in the WhatsApp group asking about, should I do this? And I tell people if you're gonna do it, like this shouldn't be the first time you're doing it. Like if you're gonna do it, like do it next summer and kind of get into it. Don't do this for the first time on the trip because you're just adding more stuff to kind of have to worry about. So, that's kind of it, it's a lot and a little at the same time. We do tons and tons of these trips and, I try to, by doing so many trips, I don't want to, I'm trying to get complacent about it. I don't, the person that's going on the trip, it's their first trip. It might be my 20th trip this year, but it's their first trip. And the way I think about that is, and again, I have all these little stupid things in my head that this is the way I think about. But I think about if you're going on a cruise, right? You're going to the Caribbean, and you go on one of these excursions on one of these islands, and it's a guy on a horse, and he's leading you. You're riding horses, and you're going up on a trail somewhere off the ship. You want that guy to really, 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 or woman, you want them to really know where they're going, and you want them to be just the best guide ever. So that's what I think about. Think about I'm that guy on a horse in like St. Thomas, like just riding people around. I get to be outside with some great people. Yeah, I'm not going to discover new things all the time because we do the same trip a lot, but it's not about me, and it's about people experiencing this. And I get to do little things on my own too that are fun. But with that being said, is there any questions? Anyone have any questions? I'd love to answer questions if you had them.
Hi, Joe.
Hey.
Hey. Hi, guys. So, yeah, I have some questions. But first, I'm the guy of GravelTown here in Mexico. So first, I want to thank Joe to tell this class, to guide us with all his experience in bikepacking.
Thanks.
I would like to thank Bernie as well, Bernie Ramos. If you can make a pan, Bernie, to everybody can see our store. A little store is tiny as well, so it will be great to everybody can see our store, Bernie. So if you can like pan a little bit.
I think your store's bigger. Your store's bigger than mine, though.
I don't know.
You've been to my store. My store's tiny.
Yeah. I've been there. It's kind of the same, the same space, square feet, kind of the same. So we are the first full gravel store. Just how can I say it? Our objective is just to sell anything that have to do with the gravel things, gravel, cyclocross, and we hope we can do another year. Hopefully. Yeah. So, questions. Question number one is: you have that Kona fully packed, right? It's it doesn't matter if you go to yeah. If I would like to know if it doesn't matter if you go to a tiny trip or to a full week in camping, you don't take off any of your thing in the bike.
For a week-long trip, I will add a front handlebar bag. That's usually it. For a week-long trip, I think about it's always clothes that you overpack and clothes that take up the most space, and that's kind of the variable that you can control, right? The first aid kit isn't going to get smaller. The cooking kit isn't going to get smaller. But for me, it's clothing and really editing clothes. And for a week-long trip, I'll bring 2 or 3 t-shirts or shirts, and I'll wash them and hang them out at night and things like that. So the only thing that really changes on week-long trips versus our small trips is kind of a front bag that just has a few extra things in it. But I try to keep it pretty consistent, just so I know where things are. I know, yeah, it doesn't change very much. I can show you really super duper quick. I'm going to show you if I can do this quick. I will do it incredibly quick. I am not best guy for this. Let's see. It is screen. So I'm sharing my screen. I think this is going to be. See if I can do this. This is my bike. Yeah, this is not the greatest shot. Just get this really quick. So this is my bike for today. So for our trip this weekend. What I'll end up doing on a longer trip is kind of adding a bag in the front here, but that's kind of it. It's like nothing really changes with tent and sleeping bag and like first aid kit and cooking stuff. So it's nice to have like a system that kind of works. So that's kind of the system that I use.
Joe,
think
we're
we're
just
seeing
seeing the
that, Joe.
folder.
What's that?
I think you
All
just shared the folder window as opposed to the.
Ah.
We can see the actual image.
Oh no. Oh no. Let's see if I can do it super quick. Share screen. I'm doing this. Folders. Oh, I see what's going on. And somehow I have to. So yeah, I don't know how to share the picture. How to share that. Oh well. I'm sorry. It's a wonderful picture. It's on Instagram, so you cannot move a video. Okay, never mind. Yeah, all the cameras just got messed up here. Hold on. All right, I'm back. I'm sorry. So yeah, I don't really change too much stuff. And more questions? Any more questions? I'm sorry. No. Yeah, it's
No, I guess no, I'm fine. I don't know if
okay.
anyone else can make another.
I actually have a question.
Okay.
I was just wondering about, yeah, like you're bringing a fair amount of electronics, and do you bring like a power bank or something like that with you often, or does that kind of depend on?
That's a great question. So I used to use the dynamo and the dynamo hub that would charge kind of things. And the last year and a half, I've been using the pedal cell, which it's on my bike. It's hard to show. It's like a clamp on kind of generator. I don't want to sound like a sales pitch, but it's truly unbelievable. Like the thing with dynamos, and I used the dynamo for years. And the thing about a dynamo is it's an expensive proposition, and that's the hub dynamo, right? So we all know what we're talking about. It's an expensive situation to get involved with. And the way I always think about it is like that whole system was like designed in Germany in like the 50s for lights. And it's great for lights. But once you start trying to charge devices off a dynamo, it's like, forget it. Like it's just, and I've tried for years, and all it would do is, and as devices get more powerful and need more power, what would happen is like, my stuff would just charge, like it would lose power slower. That's all it was really doing, right? You weren't really charging anything. You were kind of just holding off the inevitable. And in those cases, and again, I think about like, I want my phone to be 100%. I want my Garmin to be 100% all the time, right? Because of safety. So last year I started using this pedal cell thing, and it's unbelievable. It clamps right onto your bike. You can move it from bike to bike. The power output is unbelievable. Look it up. Definitely look it up. But it's we did a week in the Catskills last week. I didn't plug in once. I was charging other people's batteries because I had the capacity to do it. I'm riding all day anyway. So that's what I use. And I bring a battery as a backup, like a 30,000 power bank, whatever, just as a backup, just in case that system goes wrong or something happens. And I never use it. I also bring 2 GoPros. I bring a camera, my phone. So a decent amount of electronics, and all of it's like totally taken care of by the pedal cell, which is pretty amazing. Now, the downside is, when you're going 2 miles an hour, you're not really charging anything sometimes. And that could be a pain when you're in the mountains going up and down. But check out that product. It's like, the way I describe it is like, I'm still waiting for like the other shoe to drop. Like, I don't know who would get a dynamo at this point, except someone that's a traditionalist and likes that look and likes the whole style and everything. But in terms of like cost, it's like $300. you can move it from bike to bike. Like, good luck moving a dynamo system from bike to bike. Like, forget it. You know, you're soldering wires and things like that. And the power output is just amazing. So that's kind of how I manage that kind of stuff. And more, I sell them in the shop, but it's hard for me to sell them because the guy wants me to buy 5 and blah, blah, blah. So I don't sell them directly a lot of times, but check them out online and you can buy consumer direct. But I've not found the flaw to that product yet, besides the company not selling it to me at a good price. So.
And does that integrate with your lights? Because that's something like I have really nice bright lights that I use in the city, but I'm not going to be, I'm going to be able to recharge them frequently.
Yeah, you can, a lot of USB lights have like what's called a pass through, meaning that you can keep them charged and kind of keep them lit. I use USB lights and I just charge them at the end of the day. So I'm not using the pedal cell I'm not using the pedal cell to directly, the pedal cell has 2 outputs. One goes to my phone, one goes to my Garmin. So I'm not using it directly to kind of light lights while I'm moving. The lights are charged, and when I get to camp, I'll charge them overnight. Or, in the morning, I'll charge them during the day. Like, I'll just charge them when I'm not using them. But you can use it to kind of light up lights, and I just don't use it that way, but I know you can.
Joe, do
Yeah.
you always plan these trips? And do you always go to a camping place? I mean, is there any way you camp in and your community camp in the wilderness, or do you always camp in the camping place?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, we generally, when it's a small group of just me and friends, we'll do the wilderness thing. But when it's a group of people that, if there's 30 people and we're going to a wilderness campsite and people are new, it's a really tough one. Again, it just, it's tough to bring a lot of people into the wilderness like that. So I generally don't. I generally go to camping sites with a big group. But when it's me and my friends in a very little group, we'll do wilderness camping, but not as a big trip. So.
And how about tents? What do you recommend the most?
The tent, so I use the Big Agnes stuff a lot. They get very expensive. So I've used Big Agnes tents for years. And the challenge that I had with that particular brand is that it's a fantastic brand, but someone that walks into the store and wants to get involved in camping and bike camping, here's your $500 tent, and it's like, that's a big, it's a big thing to chew off. So I've been using this year a company called 6 Moon Designs. I've been using their tent the entire year. It's $160, 40 ounces. Like, it's awesome. Like, and I've used it the entire year because I wanted to, as an example, like, this is the tent I'm using this year. This is an affordable tent. This is an incredible company, in the rain and all kinds of stuff. So that's the tent I'm using right now. Is from 6 Moon Designs. It's called the Trekker something, or I forget the model name. And I've sold a number of them because, again, I'm using them on the trips. If it's good enough for that guy to use it, then, then it's good. So using it by example, it's been really powerful in order to sell them. But yeah, that's the tent I'm using right now. And it's pretty small. I mean, it gets down to about this big, and it's, again, 40 ounces, which is like nothing. So that's the tent I use right now. And I have 3 different sleeping bags. I have a 15 degree, 30 degree, and a 45. And I use, throughout the year up in this part of the country, you get a very wide range of temperatures. So I'll use the bag that's for the right temperature. All right.
Joe, you talked a little bit about like power, but and maybe it's not as relevant for the short tours, but you use USB rechargeable things even on like a longer trip versus like having something that you can swap out batteries.
Yeah, I end up using USB stuff. I know that, like, right. I mean, I know that the advantage of batteries is like you can just put new batteries in and you're good to go. Like, I know that headlamps tend to still be very battery kind of focused, it seems. But I just use a USB one only because I've got a good power source, and yeah, I don't have anything. I bring a couple extra batteries for people that need them, a couple AA's and AAA's in my little kit, but I don't have anything that's battery operated at this point. And even on the 5 days and 7 day trips we're doing, you're not, we always joke that you're never more than 50 feet from civilization. You're not in the, wilderness. You are, but yeah, so I don't have any battery stuff. It's all USB rechargeable, and I kind of use it off the pedal cell. And if there's a problem with that, I have that battery bank, and if there's a problem with that, I can find a place to charge it if I had to, a lot of the campsites we go to, if there's like a shower building or a bathroom building, there's always an outlet or something. So that's what people will use. But yeah, I use USB stuff just about everywhere.
Okay, Joe. So I'd like to thank you again, man. Thank
Oh,
you
yeah.
a lot for this class to say this class in the first birthday of
Yeah.
GravelTown. Thank you
It's
thank you
exciting.
so much, really. And I don't know, we will be in touch shortly.
Many happy birthday, and hope you have many more. All right, good night, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all, mates.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.